Once again, this story picks up and it has legs now. We're seeing that, I guess, a collective group of the women's players across the world have filed a lawsuit in regards to Canada playing the Women's World Cup here on AstroTurf. Give us the details and tell us what you've heard and what's going on today.
Well, today the legal firm sent out the final letter, which is a letter that says, okay, this is your last warning. So this legal firm from the States that has partners in Canada who represent about 40 of some of the world's top players, a lot of Americans. Abby Wambach, Alex Morgan are some of the big names that jump out at you. Meeting Anger, the German player, also jumps out from that group. They're claiming that the fact that this will be the first World Cup, Senior World Cup, and I stress senior, that will be played on field turf or artificial surfaces exclusively is a violation of Canadian human rights. It creates gender inequality, and they want to test that going forward. They're looking forward to going to a human rights tribunal. At the same time today, FIFA made sure to announce to the world, even though this was already planned, and the Canadian Soccer Association advised me today, this was something that was already in the works, but I think FIFA wanted to put that out there knowing that this was coming today, that an independent group has been hired to basically ensure the quality of Canada's fields for the tournament, that they will be monitoring the field tours and making sure that they are to the highest quality standard, the 2-star that FIFA can offer. And I think they're doing that I think part of that, to announce that today, is to sort of say, look, if you're going to go that way with the lawsuit, we've hired an independent body who's going to vet our fields, and it's going to make it harder for you to make a case when we A, allow that surface to be used, and B, we've brought an independent body in. I mean, we're going to question always. I know the cynics are always going to say if FIFA's involved, how independent is the body? But I think this is all well and good, but it's going to boil down. Really, it's a PR battle, and in the long run, I don't think this is about the courts. I think this is simply a very protracted public relations battle with some people really trying to cast some doubts on Canada's ability to host the tournament next year.
And I think that's disgusting, Steve, to be quite honest and frank about it. You know me. You've known me for years now. I'm not a big and huge supporter of the CSA, but I'm going to go to bat for them on this one 110%. Look, the CSA is not perfect. They've done some real good things and they've done some not real good things. But this, to me, is absolutely stupid. And why it continues to pick up steam, I have no idea. To me, it makes no sense why they keep complaining and whining about not wanting to play on the turf, when, if I'm not mistaken, Steve, didn't Team USA, the women's Team USA, play in Rochester on a turf field that's not even 1-star rated by FIFA's accounts?
And that's actually where Abby Wambach plays her league games, because she plays for the Western New York Flash. And that's true. It's a very old surface that they have. The thing, though, that really gets me, because I do understand the players' right to really question this direction, and I get it. I understand. But the thing is that Canada was fairly transparent about their bidding process. It was part of their bid, which was awarded in 2011. In 2011, we all knew that this tournament was going to be entirely on artificial turf. Why is it less than a year out the legal things come? This is where it reeks of sabotage, where it goes from being an honest discussion about the surface that's going to be used. Why did Abby Wambach, why didn't Alex Morgan step forward in 2011? You can't tell me that they were naive enough not to know.
You're bang on, Steve. You're bang on, Steve.
That would incite a level of basically a level of ignorance that I would never accuse anyone of. They would have known that. Why is that wait till 2014? To me, that's the very, very cynical part of this. I can understand having this discussion in 2011. I think it would have been great to have this discussion in 2011.
But let me ask you this, Steve. Let me ask you this before you continue on. You're making a lot of great points. Let me ask you this. You said to us right off the top that you would say more than 75, 80% of the people involved in this are the American ladies, and they're the ones that are trying to push this forward, and a few other players from other parts of the world, but mostly from the Americans, correct?
Well, honestly, I think the proof's in the pudding when you look at the names on the list. I mean, let's put it this way: when the Germans were here for the Under-20 World Cup, and yes, Anger is on that list, they seem pretty fine with playing on this artificial surface. In fact, they've been prepping on it. A lot of the European teams have been prepping on it, and honestly, the Under-20 women's coach for Germany, Maren Meinert, had basically said you prepare for it like you prepare for any tournament. You know that you may go to a country and the weather's a certain way. We know that Canada's climate's like this. You know, if you go to a separate country, it might be warmer, it might be cooler, it might be windy, it might not be windy. And then you also play for the turf. And you understand that you prep for it. That's what your coaches do. That's what your association does. She didn't see the big deal with it.
This is ridiculous, Steve. Absolutely ridiculous on so many accounts. And I'll tell you why. I have a sneaky suspicion. I could be wrong. You tell me if I'm wrong. But this smells to me. This stinks. And I have a feeling this has to do with Canada's bid that they want to bid for the 2026 Men's World Cup. That, to me, has to play some kind of part. Am I way out in left field, or do I have some kind of idea that this could be happening?
I don't think so. I think there's a lot of people who understand that Canada, by leaping out of the gate for the 2026 bid, well ahead of anyone else in the world, has maybe garnered already some goodwill, especially with the women's tournaments going so well and the Under-20 in 2007 being such a success, that maybe, let's put it this way, because the Americans have still been playing. They've been hemming and hawing if they're going to bid on 2026 or not. We know what Sunil Gulati has said about wanting changes to FIFA's system. But I think at the same time, there's a recognition in CONCACAF that if Canada would get this tournament in 2026, the earliest, if FIFA doesn't change the rotation policy, the earliest the United States would get a World Cup would be 2040. And I think that there's an understanding there, and I think there is a bit of cynicism there in terms of throwing some mud at us. Like, even if we don't get the World Cup in 2026, and I'm speaking from the American perspective, we're going to make sure Canada doesn't get it either. I hope I'm wrong, but I certainly get the feeling that it would explain why the timing for this is so odd, in the sense of what I said earlier, that why didn't we have this discussion in 2011? Because 2011 we could have worked out these problems and still gone towards 2015, no problem. But now you put a real wrench in the situation, and I think no one talks about the other tenants of the stadiums. These aren't sole soccer stadiums, and the CFL teams expect to take possession of them the day after the Women's World Cup.
Well, let me explain
to our
Steve. Let me explain to our viewers and listeners out there that are not from Canada. CFL is the Canadian Football League, which is our professional football league. It's like the NFL in the US of A. So the CFL that Steve mentioned is the Canadian Football League. Continue, Steve.
And they share stadiums with a lot of these teams, or they're tenants. And our Canadian Football League season starts July 1st, usually, Canada Day. Those teams have been very accommodating to make sure Canada can bid for both the Under-20 and the Women's World Cup. The CFL has gone out of its way to be accommodating, altering its schedule, altering training camps. For example, the team in Edmonton, the Eskimos, is going to have their training camp in Fort McMurray, 4 hours north. Next year, and play their preseason games there because they won't have their stadium because of the Women's World Cup. But of course, football is a sport that they prefer playing on the artificial, the field turf, because it doesn't get torn up. It's extremely expensive to play on grass. They don't want grass, and because their schedule, they're already compressing it to make way. They expect to be back and training in their stadiums like the day after when the lines go up off of the soccer stadiums. People like to say, "Oh, we can roll grass in and then roll it out." But it would cause such a disruption to their schedule when they've already been so accommodating. It would be a real sort of nasty partnership, a real stab in the back of someone who's actually really been trying to help us. I'm a big believer that the soccer community has to understand and build allies with other sports and not try to be antagonistic towards them. And I think there's been a lot of goodwill from the CFL that could go absolutely kaput if we were to put grass into our stadiums.